couldn't imagine the conversation occurring within. Brief flickers of light and what sounded like birdsong inside the thick mud-thatched structure compounded his confusion. He imagined the people were equally as fascinating as the world they lived in. It was a damn shame its days would soon be through. At some point, just before the sun rose, one of the old people opened the door, looked at him with beleaguered eyes, and motioned him to come inside. The wayfarer obliged and entered the hut, which appeared much larger on the inside. Its conical shape and domed ceiling gave one the impression of comfort in which 20 to 30 people could easily live. Only 10 people, plus the wayfarer, occupied it presently. The old people all sat around an empty fire pit. A number of clay jars sat in the pit instead of logs and burning embers. A number of long reeds emerged from these jars. His curiosity piqued as he noticed a number of small birds in the hut. This explained the birdsong, and he imagined the clay jars had something to do with the lights he saw. He just couldn't figure what. "Sit," said an old woman who pointed to an empty space around the fire pit. Once seated, an old man with skin that hung like rags from his bones spoke in a wispy voice. "Tell us why you're here." The wayfarer wasn't quick to reply, and used the silence to measure each of their weathered faces. He was amazed how he could understand their language. It was as uncommon as the very rock he sat on, yet here he was, speaking to them as though he'd been born and raised in a neighboring village. I'm here because a great war is about to begin on your world." The words surprised him. How he knew this, he didn't know. He just knew it had to be said. To these old people, of all people. The old people solemnly nodded, and the stranger felt nothing but great despair. The same man spoke once more. "And tell us why that brings you to us." The wayfarer looked to the ground between his knees. One of the small birds hopped in front of him, pecking at a pebble. He knew the statement was more of a test than anything, and his response would determine what happened next. He looked to each of them, 10 in all, 10 birds and 10 clay pots. Then he thought of the stars. The pathway that started narrow in the east. He pointed to the ceiling of the hut, but past it as well. "I would like to hear your stories," he whispered. "About the stars." He surmised the old people had been doing more than debating his arrival while he waited outside. While he wasn't quite sure what it was, he imagined they gathered to see what mention there was of him in their stories. As it turned out, he was right on both accounts. They gathered precisely to recall their stories, to see what role he served. The old man that spoke for them all addressed him once more. "Each of us knows only one story because we've only ever been given one story. Some of us may know a second. This depends on whether or not the occasion has ever been met in complete trust with another. None of us has ever heard more than a second story." He motioned to each of the old people. "That was until yesterday. Our stories have survived precisely because they found the ears of those who were meant to listen." He reached into the fire pit and removed one of the clay jars, and with it a reed stalk. The others did likewise. "We will tell our stories to you, but don't think for a moment that when we die, that our stories will die with us. They'll survive because they were meant to. They'll be carried on wings and in the minds of those who survive to repeat them. Or don't assume that we are sharing this with you because you are somehow special. We know you are a wayfarer, and we know what you've done to get here and what you're yet to do.